Hello all, and welcome to my video presentation on Confucius and the Analects. So basically Confucius is a well-known Chinese philosopher. Historians believe that he lived sometime from 551 to 479 BCE. He was born into the lower ranks of nobility, which allowed him to be able to sit down with political leaders and be able to discuss political topics. Confucius was not only a philosopher, but he was also a teacher, an editor, and a politician as well. He lived during a very important time in China, which was known as the 100 Schools of Thought era, in which intellectual debates were a very common thing, much like that of ancient Greek philosophy. Confucius was a very eager man, and he wanted to find a ruler who would not only cater to his talents, but work to implement his ideas. He was mainly disgusted with a lot of the leaders that he met throughout China, so he spent most of his life, just traveling from state to state, and eventually he returned home to his state of Lu, where he would eventually just teach for the rest of his life and begin to build a very great following for his works. So Confucius basically lived in the middle of the Zhao dynasty, and basically the Zhaos came in and pushed out the Shangs, and basically their main intentions were just to build a new government that showed that they really cared about their people, and they wanted to instill a lot wiser policies. A lot of Confucius's political influences came from early Zhao leaders, such as the first King Wu, his brother Cheng, the Duke of Zhao, and Wu's son, King Wen. Confucius agreed with a lot of their ideology and beliefs, and he believed basically that by following the moral values that they instilled early on, that China itself. So next, we're gonna take a look at the Analects, and then also we'll look at some excerpts from it as well. So the Analects are basically a compilation of all the sayings and ideas of Confucius. Um, the Analects were basically composed like long after Confucius had passed away, so it's believed that many of his students and followers basically took all of the things that he had said and just wrote them down and basically produced the Analects. The Analects were basically edited and rewritten for about 300 years before it reached its final form that we see today. The ideology in the Analects basically just comes from Zhao values, and Confucius even states that he's basically just a messenger. He's not an inventor of any sort. All right, so next we'll take a look at some excerpts from the Analects. The first is 1.11. It says that the master said, "When the father is alive, watch the son's actions. If 3 years later the son is not veered from the father's way, he may be called a dutiful son." Basically, what this is saying is, when a son is basically trying to follow in his father's footsteps, don't watch him. When the father's alive, wait until after the father is no longer in the picture, and then see, what his actions are. Because usually, I mean, when someone's trying to, follow somebody and carry on a name or, a certain aspect of the family, of course they're going to do the right thing when the father's around. But, when he's no longer there, it's now up to the son to basically carry on, not only the name, but the values as well as the respect that the family may have earned. The second one says that the master said, "He who rules by virtue is like the pole star, which remains unmoving in its mansion, while all the other stars revolve respectfully around it." And basically, this is saying like anyone who is in a position of power to be a leader amongst people, if they're basically doing the right thing, they're like the sun or like the North Star, like they're always in that one spot, and it just seems as though like everything's just following around it, like it's revolving around it, because it's basically the center of everything. And then the third one, the master said, "Barbarians who have rulers are inferior to the various nations of China who are without." Basically, this is just talking about the different, I guess, um, political conflicts that are happening in China this time, and there are a lot of states in China that I guess just didn't have great rulers. And basically, what Confucius is saying is that these people who, even though they have rulers, if they're acting like this, they're basically inferior to the other nations because they just don't know how to behave. Whereas those who are behaving properly, have no leadership, are obviously doing something right because they're not acting chaotic. So we'll continue with the excerpts. I just have a few more, and then I guess we'll try to wrap this up. But 9.14 basically says the master wanted to settle among the 9 barbarian tribes of the east. Someone said, "It is wild in those parts. How would you cope?" The master said, "How could it be wild once a gentleman has settled there?" And basically, this is kind of tying back to the last one about the barbarian nations with leaders. Basically, Confucius believed a lot in chivalry and behaving as a gentleman, and he believed that if someone with the stature of a gentleman was to settle in an area of chaos and conflict, that in due time, maybe not this generation, but the next one will eventually start to see the light and begin to change their ways. 917 says the master stood by the river and said, "Everything flows like this, without ceasing, day and night." Basically, this is just alluding to time because time never stops, regardless of anything, and it's very much like a river. A river is always going to flow, regardless of what might be in its way. I mean, you may put a dam in front of it, but that's not going to stop the water from getting where it has to go. 817, the master said, "Learning is like a chase in which, as you fail to catch up, you fear to lose what you have already gained." And I like this a lot because it reminded me a lot of like what I go through as a college student. Basically, I mean, you're always constantly learning things, and it feels always though is like the more you learn, sometimes you tend to forget, the things that you learn, made in the past or a class before, and so sometimes you start to get that fear that maybe as you start to learn more, you're gonna start to forget, and I'm sure we've all fell victim to that at some point. So basically, this is the modern day impact that the Analects have basically had on the world. As I said before, the Analects took its final form, and once it did, it basically laid down the foundation to a lot of the ideologies of the Han Dynasty, which came after the Zhaos. It was during the Han Dynasty that Confucianism would basically be born. Um, and Confucius' way of life and his ideas continue to shape, you know, East Asia, not only then, but now as well. Um, the current Republic of China has recently, veered away from Confucianism in their politics. But recently, in the last, 10, 20, 30 years, they've instilled Confucian ideas basically to help not only revive the economy in China, but also abroad. The Analects is the most read and studied book in China over the last 2 millenniums. Its teachings continue to have an impact on the thoughts and values of East Asia. It has also been translated numerous times and is studied in numerous institutions basically across the world. So last, I just want to cite my sources. Special thanks to the Classics webpage over at MIT for hosting the Analects. Um, Definitely want to thank the Norton Anthology for World Literature. Basically, it's our class text. A lot of great information in the book, as well as the excerpts from the Analects. There's also the college website, which gives a lot of background information on East Asia as well as the different dynasties and basically what was going on there in the life of Confucius. And also, just want to thank uh, the page on Confucius from Stanford, which gives a lot of background detail that wasn't included in the college text.